Hey guys, welcome to week 2 of the Change Challenge. This week we're going to be taking a look at food labels and food shopping. The reason why we're going to take a look at food labels and food shopping is because these days it's really hard to eat intuitively. Eat when you are just hungry and eat the correct amount of food, and it is common for health foods to be overconsumed as well, or to be underestimated in terms of calories. And with the abundance of food in general and processed foods, it is hard to eat intuitively without having this understanding of the composition, the calorie content, etc. Some of the things that we touched on last week, without knowing all of that within the food. And over time, once you begin to understand more and learn more about the foods that you're eating and the components and what they contain, it becomes a bit easier then to be a bit more flexible and eat intuitively without having to monitor and track everything that you do in your food. So the purpose of a nutrition label or food label, there's many purposes, but essentially, if I was to sum all of this up, is to help you make an informed choice and essentially provide information about that product. It will tell you everything that's in it, the calorie content, and what you should be expecting when you have that food in terms of energy intake, energy balance, and everything, again, what we touched on previously last week. Now, there are many components of food label, and we're going to break these down a bit further later on, but this is what you should be expecting from a food label. The name, you'd hope to know essentially what the product is from that, a description of it, when you should use it by, what the components, what it contains, the ingredient list, potentially a traffic light system, the nutrition label, the quantity or serving sizes, and how to cook or use the product. I'm going to break a lot of these down as we go through the presentation now. So we'll start with the front of package labeling, which is essentially commonly this traffic light system that you might be familiar with. Now, it is actually a voluntary system. This isn't mandatory, it isn't essential. You may sometimes find it on a product without the traffic light system, but a lot of companies now have adopted this and have started including the traffic light systems, the green, the amber and the red. Now, it doesn't contain all of the information about the food, but it gives you an initial indication of how this food is composed. A lot of the times it will include energy intakes, a calorie intake of the serving, fat, saturated fats, sodium, and sugar. Now, it like I've just said, it is an initial indicator of whether this food will be beneficial in your diet or not, but it isn't a indicator of whether you should or shouldn't eat this food. There are many flaws where there may be red across the board, but the food could have some health benefits. For example, nuts would have the red in the fat area and potentially saturated fat, but nuts aren't a bad food. And the same is vice versa, that there may be foods that are very low in fat and maybe have moderate sugar, but may not necessarily be the best option for you. And we'll touch on that later on, where manufacturers can play with different components of food to make them look better than what they are. But essentially it's an initial indication, and you don't want to use this as the final or the only decision that you make on this food. Next, if we move into the back of the product, where you would find the ingredient list, this is a very good place to give you a better picture of this food, but again, it takes a bit longer to understand what's going on here. So all food products that have a food label have to have an ingredients list, and the order of this ingredient list must be in order of the weight of the main ingredient. So if the first ingredient is sugar, the majority of that food will be sugar. And as you move further down the list, that you will find that ingredient is in a smaller quantity within that food. So essentially, if you're finding certain ingredients earlier in the list of ingredients that aren't going to be as beneficial, so added sugars, added fats, etc., you want to maybe start avoiding those kind of foods. There may also be alternative words, which we're going to touch on in a minute, for things like sugar. And if it is mentioned in the name or description of the food, there has to be a percentage attached to that in the ingredients list. So as you can see here, the first ingredient has 43% composition within that food. So just as I touched on, within the ingredient list, sugar doesn't have to be called sugar. And this is one ingredient of many that could have alternative names. Now, I don't know whether this is an extensive list, but these are some of the alternative names that you could find for sugar on the left-hand side of the screen. And as you can see, there's quite a lot that don't necessarily just say sugar. It could be where something is concentrated, or using something such as honey, which would sweeten the product, but they wouldn't have to call it sugar. This will be shown on the nutrition label, which we're going to touch on in a couple of minutes, but it could be that if you take a look at the ingredient list and you don't see the word sugar, that you think it's all naturally occurring sugars, when they have actually added certain ingredients to increase the sugar content. And as you can see on the right hand side, some examples where you may not see the word sugar. You may see the word sugar in there, but other alternatives to increase the sweetness of the product without actually using the word sugar. So for example, concentrated pineapple juice would essentially contain a lot of sugar, but they haven't had to use the word sugar for that. And on the bottom example, invert sugar syrup would be slightly more obvious, but something like glucose syrup might not be as obvious to notice as added sugar. Moving on to the nutrition label, this is mandatory for products with a food label, and has to be displayed in a particular order, as you can see here. And sometimes further breakdowns can be included, but the ones in white are essential, and the ones in yellow are optional if the manufacturer decides to add this information. Now, products have to be given per 100 grams, which allows you to then make a comparison to other products a bit easier, and they can also give their nutrition label also in the serving size that's available. So using the 100 gram example, or the 100 gram values, is a bit easier to compare between products. If you had two products that you wanted to check the energy content or the fat content, it's much easier to see between the products where the serving sizes may vary. At this point, once you begin looking at a few different foods, or when you are trying to compose meals, which we'll be touching a bit more on next week, this is where you'll want to start paying a bit more attention to the different macronutrients within the food. And depending on the time of day or your meal plan, that again we'll touch on next week, you will want to have you want to be looking a lot more here at the different levels of fats within the product, carbohydrates and protein. But this is where you'll find it, and it will be a really good task for you to go away and take a look at a lot of nutrition labels. Just go and take a look in your fridge, in your cupboards, and start to see how different products are composed, and see how they vary. And again, next week when we look at preparing meals or putting together a meal plan, we'll be utilising nutrition labels and using this particular part of a food label to be able to put foods together within your meal plan. Now, some products will make health and nutrient claims. Health claims are a bit more complex for manufacturers to make these days, and they have to be verified. But nutrient claims are much easier to make, so such as light, reduced fat, or reduced sugar, low in sugar. Now, all of these terms have a particular regulation with them. So if something's going to be light or reduced, it has to be 30% lower than the standard product. Now, sometimes again this can be slightly misleading if they make a decision on the product that they compare it to. Within regulation, it does have to be a similar product, but again, manufacturers will, where possible, find a product that makes it more favourable or easier for them to make this claim. And for example, the no added sugar, it doesn't necessarily mean that sugar isn't present, but they haven't added it. So if it was a fruit juice, for example, there will still be a lot of sugar present, but they haven't necessarily sweetened it anymore. But again, this could still contribute towards extra calories that you wouldn't want to be consuming, or much more carbohydrates that you wouldn't necessarily want, despite having the no added sugar label. It's also important to consider that whilst there may be a nutrient that is reduced or low, that manufacturers may make up for this by increasing something else. So whilst the product may be low fat or reduced fat, they may have added other things such as sugar to then counteract the flavour, which may not make the difference in calories that you would have expected if it was just reduced fat. So as you can see here, with an Asda low-fat chocolate sundae, and many other companies may do this as well, such as Tesco or Sainsbury's, whilst fat shows as green on the traffic light system, the sugars are very high. So as I've just mentioned, the manufacturer may try and compensate with another component of the food and increase that. And as you can see in the bottom left corner, the best way to do this, and as I've touched on already, is taking a look at the nutrition label and comparing that and seeing the content within 100 grams. And as I've said, the more you look at the nutrition labels, the more you'll be able to build up a picture of each food individually. It's very hard when with the first nutrition label you'll ever take a look at, you won't really know what should be expected or what should be normal within that food. But as you begin to build a picture and look at more and more nutrition labels, you'll begin to realise where the value should lie and what would be low and what would be considered high. And again, another claim that could be made is high in protein. Products to be labelled as high in protein only need to have 20% protein, so 20 grams per 100 grams. And again, one of the problems with this nutrient claim is that it doesn't differentiate between the quality of the protein. So as we touched on last week, there are many different kinds of proteins, and the only complete sources of protein would be from animal products. So if they were fortifying something with just wheat protein, this wouldn't necessarily be a good quality protein or using that as a source of protein wouldn't be the best source. So if you take a look at the labels that we can see there, from the Weetabix protein, which is a high in protein product, on the left hand side is the values for the normal Weetabix. On the right hand side are the values for the protein Weetabix. Now, per 100 grams, as you can see on the right hand side, the protein Weetabix doesn't actually meet the 20 grams, but is near enough, so they can call it high in protein. And on the left hand side, it's much lower, nearly half. However, per serving, there isn't actually that much of a significant increase in protein. There's around 3 grams extra protein, which in the grand scheme of things per serving would not be significant. And with the inaccuracy, let's say plus or minus 10% of food labels, they could be quite similar per serving for the protein content. So this is where we've now begun to combine taking a look at a food label, some of the flaws in health and nutrient claims, and began to build a picture now of how the claims on a package and the marketing by a manufacturer doesn't necessarily translate to the result you would expect. Something that we'll only briefly touch on is the allergen information, because it will have a significant impact on your goals, but it's important to know that the allergens do have to be highlighted, and that will be within the ingredient list. So any allergies that you do have, you'll find these within the ingredient list, and they will be clearly marked. The common ones, such as wheat and milk, you'll see a lot within the within the ingredient list. So we're going to quickly move on to portion sizes, and again, as part of the food label, the quantity of the product has to be shown and the serving sizes have to be shown. But again, this can be very misleading from manufacturer to manufacturer and from product to product. So if you take a look here, within the nutrition label, the values are shown per 100 grams, as they have to be. But the product doesn't have a nutrition label for the serving size. Now, the label does tell you that the product is 1 serving, but the actual yogurt here is 150 grams. That means then that on the nutrition label you have to, if you would like to know the quantity of the macronutrients and its components, you have to then times them from the 100 grams to the 150 gram equivalent, so by 1.5. So again, this can become very misleading, that when you first take a look at this nutrition label, that the values are per 100 grams, but the 1 serving size of 150 grams values aren't there. And as you can see on the front of the pot, the only part of the traffic light system shown is the calorie content, and that is for the entire serving, which would be 242 calories. And again, they haven't color coded that, it's just plain. So if you were to look at the nutrition label for the entire serving, you would be looking somewhere in the region of 25 grams to 26 grams of sugar, and around 14 grams of fat as well. It's quite a significant amount of sugar and fat within that product, which may be why they have not included the traffic light system and not included the values per 150 grams. But it would be easy to miss the nutrition label not being in the correct serving size. And again, you can see the same here with another yogurt, which the serving size is 180 grams, but again, the value is shown per 100 grams. So we're going to move on to food shopping now and explore how to make food shopping as successful as possible towards your goals. Some tips for food shopping would be planning a weekly menu in advance, and from there we can create a shopping list. Preparing your shopping list by aisle or area within the shop can make it much easier and will stop you from picking up other items that might not be helpful towards your goals. And again, one other tip is that if you are trying to avoid calorie dense and nutrient sparse items, if you don't have them at home, so if you don't buy them during the shopping trip, or if you do but you portion them, then that's going to help you with your calorie consumption and limiting the calorie consumption of snacks. Keeping certain things stocked for quick and easy meals. It may be that you get home too late and too tired to cook. And having certain things in which we'll go through will make it much easier. Having a list and maybe adding that when you run out of certain things. And one of the common ones that you probably hear is not going shopping hungry, as you're more likely to buy higher calorie items. So, as I hope you would kind of be aware of now after touching on the health and nutrient claims and the serving sizes, it's important to be skeptical. The highlighted labels such as high in protein, low in sugar, no added sugars, aren't likely to be as true as they may seem within the marketing. Certain things such as added flavours again can essentially mean added sugar. So it's really important now that one of the tasks when you're food shopping is checking that nutrition label and the ingredient list. And again, with checking the food labels and having that awareness of the ingredient list, nutrition label, and being able to build a picture of a food will help you with your meal planning over time. The same will be applied to food shopping as you begin to build a more regular meal plan and aware of what foods help you towards your goals and fit within your meal plan. Your food shopping trip will become much easier and much quicker as you'll know what areas to be looking for within certain foods. So creating the shopping list, as you can see on the left hand side, is an example meal plan with breakfast including eggs, Greek yogurt, lunches including tuna, chicken breast and rice, some snacks such as nuts and fruits, and then evening meals which are similar meals to the lunchtime with some sweet potatoes in there. So from that, transferring across to a shopping list, we can have the eggs, the chicken breast, the mincemeat, which will be for the homemade burgers on Wednesday dinner time, the rice, and all of the other components that went together to make that meal plan. From that shopping list, we can then put that together into different areas that you may find within the store, making it much easier, stopping you having running up and down certain aisles and going past foods that may be on offer, or certain foods that you may pick up that might be higher in calories or you may have cravings for. And then maybe having some items on a list that you would always pick up. So certain items such as Greek yogurt, low fat sausages that you may have for breakfast, sweet potatoes to always have in for meals, and eggs. Certain items that you could always keep stocked up that might be easier to have quicker meals with, or convenience such as the frozen vegetables, and then some snacks and treats that again you might portion yourself, or you may just include through the day to stop you going out and buying certain snacks and treats. So some examples of some quick easy meals or snacks could be using tins of tuna that you would always have stocked up. It could be chicken that you may always just have some in the fridge or in the freezer. Eggs are another good one. Greek yogurt is an easy one, and that could be with some frozen fruits. You don't have the problem of fresh fruit always going bad. Protein pancakes, that could be either in a powdered mixture that you would be able to make, so on and so forth. Just easy convenience sources of protein and other macronutrients that might necessarily go out of date as quick. So that concludes the food label and the food shopping presentation. So I hope from here you can begin to paint a picture of different foods. As I've said, a really good task would be to go away and start to take a look at different nutrition labels, maybe do it whilst you're out food shopping, and really start to build a picture of how different foods look. You can do this with foods that you commonly eat and start to then try and see what you might need to alter or adjust to start making this meal plan fit towards what your goals are. Based on the knowledge that you built last week, you can start to understand the difference between different proteins, the carbohydrate qualities, and everything that we touched on, such as fibre content, etc., and start to use this knowledge that you've gained this week to start to build a better picture of what foods you're eating and why, and what ones to include. Looking forward to next week. See you soon.